Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nick. This is MSFS Flight Plans, a place where we not only explore the best looking locations on the planet, but we also learn everything we can about them. All with the hope of making this giant world of ours just a little bit smaller, and we might even wind up saving the entire world while we're at it. Today we are going to check out a spot that is very near and dear to me up in the Chilean Andes, and I'll tell you why it's special once we get up in the air. But this general region is locally known as the Valle de la Luna, or if your Spanish isn't what it used to be, the Valley of the Moon, and you'll know why it's called that for sure by the time we're done looking at it. And since nothing goes together quite like the Chancellor and the Andes, I figured we wouldn't upset the aviation gods today by flying anything other than my absolute hands-down favorite plane in the sim. It is, of course, the 414. Any chance we get to fly this thing, I'm all down for that. And the only thing I have pre-configured is our fuel tanks, because it's way down there on the floor, so this will be an almost cold and dark startup. And I've done this enough times that I really don't need to think about it too much anymore. Battery generators, mags, fuel. And what we're going to do here is look... Oh, you can't... Yeah, we can. Okay, since we turned the power on, we're at almost 8,000 feet. That is accurate. So we're going to give it a little bit more than half mix. Full props. Crack the throttle, because if we go full mix, it'll be running a little rough right out of the gate. And I'm actually going to pull our trim back just a little bit. I felt I was a little nose heavy on the last test flight takeoff. Okay, prime engine number 1. And fire her up. And I did crack the window just so we can hear those babies roar to life. Awesome. And number 2. Fire it up. We're going to be getting up to 18,000 feet, so we got 10,000 more feet to go, and we got to be there by the time we get to these mountains over here, so it's going to have to be a pretty quick climb. Avionics on, fuel pumps off. Okay, let's get everything else kind of set up here. Before we bring our yoke back, we are going to have to pressurize, so we'll get that to 18,000. And no, I cannot see those numbers down there, but I know 18,000 is at about the 12 o'clock position. So we'll get that little dot right above our dial there. Okay, very good. Bring the yoke back, and let's shut the window before it gets too noisy. We'll go ahead and set this guy to 18,000. For our altitude target, go ahead and arm that. And transponder, we'll put on standby mode, get our taxi lights on. Get the GPS warming up. How's everything else going? So far, so good. All right, let's look at the Google map real quick. So there's South America. And man, when I was looking at this on little NavMap at the end, which we will of course do, this is just covered. All the Andes are covered by bookmarks, which means we have taken a ton of flights out here. Probably because it looks so incredible. So there's Santiago. We took a flight out there once. I will mention that as we're flying around, so that's kind of where it is from where we are. We're leaving right about this spot right here. So if you look at this big, huge salt flat in Bolivia, which we also flew over, and then you go a little bit south from that, you will see this town called San Pedro de Atacama, which is really out in the middle of nowhere. And here's our runway. So we're parked right here in that little parking spot. We're going to take off towards the east. Let me zoom back out. And we're going to head over to these volcanoes. Now we need to be at 18,000 by the time we hit this, so that's how far we've got to get 10,000 feet higher. We'll circle around to the north of these guys. These are actually 2 salt lakes right here, so there's a little strip of land right between those that'll split those. We're going to come around this way, cut around the sides of these mountains, because there's a huge astronomical telescope array, and we're going to come down this little valley here, across this much bigger valley. And then here's the Valley of the Moon, and since we can't cut up this side, or it'll be too tight of a turn to get back in for our landing, I'm going to come around this side, but I did put a camera in the back on the right side, so we'll hop back there and look at that. And I think the whole trip is about 100 miles, almost exactly, so should be relatively quick in this thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull that throttle back a little bit so we don't launch when we take the parking brakes off. Parking brakes off. Check the barrel, good to go. This is not the live weather, though it looks exactly like this. I had to get the winds a little bit more favorable for our takeoff and landing, which works out great because it's going to give us a tailwind for the longest, deadest duration of this journey, which isn't all that long. In this airport, I couldn't find too much information about it. It's called San Pedro de Atacama Airport, named after that town back there. There was a wiki page, but all it said was that it was named after that town, really. And that it's at 8,000 feet and has a 6,500 foot runway. So, decent length for a plane like this. The only add-ons we've got is the freeware for that telescope array, which is going to look awesome. And I also am using the latest Bing map, which does help in this area too. It looks pretty good by default. But there's a few blank spots where you're going to see some of those weird-looking squares if you don't have that in there, so just a heads up with that. But that's also free if you want to get it and put it in. And I still feel like my brakes are just a little bit grabby. We can manage that. Alright, get ourselves centered up here. And final checks. Taxi lights off, landing lights on, one notch of flaps. We'll go ahead and get our radar on here, just so we can keep an eye on that terrain. And I'm going to shoot for the best rate of climb, which is around 115 knots. And this needs to be over to altitude mode, is that it? Yeah, that's it. Altitude target set, CDI on GPS, everything else is good to go. And we'll go ahead and pull that mix back. We'll adjust it just a little bit, probably go a little bit rich of peak once we get up in the air. Other than that, I think we're ready. Let's roll. Listen to the sound of those engines. Amazing. But there are hardly ever any clouds up here, so if you go with the clear sky setting, not only will you probably get slightly better graphical performance because you won't have to model any clouds, but this is pretty much what it looks like all the time. And we'll rotate at 80 knots. There we go. And we're up. Gear up. And we'll go ahead and kick the autopilot on. Nav mode, vertical speed. We're going to climb at 1,300 feet a minute. I might even push that a little bit. Flaps up. Landing lights off. Prop sync on. And we'll pull our manifold pressure back to 35 inches. We'll leave our RPMs at full ahead, because I think they'll probably be okay. They'll chill out a little bit. We'll pull that manifold pressure back a little bit once we level out too. Alright, everything's looking good. So far, so good. So that region called the Valley of the Moon is of course back behind us. You probably noticed that on the Google map, and we're definitely going to get a nice view of that when we're coming in. But first we got to do a little mountain climbing up to check out these peaks up ahead. And we've also got a pair of incredible salt lakes that we checked out, and of course, and those salt lakes are going to look quite a bit like they did on that map. The water is really going to be that bluish green color. And of course we have our telescope array. But along the way, just in case you missed any of our other flights in this region, I'll tell you a bit about the geography of Chile and the geology of these mountains, both of which are very interesting. Look how cool this looks. For one thing, if you've ever taken a good look at the country of Chile on a map before 5 minutes ago when I showed it to you, you know it is long, really long. It spans more than half the western coast of South America, stretching across 38 degrees of latitude. And at 2,647 miles long, holds the world's title for north-south length as far as countries go. But it's also pretty skinny, just 217 miles across at its fattest point, which is about the same width as California, to help you conceptualize that. And the climate ranges from high-altitude deserts like we have up here. Really, most of the northern part of the country is like this. And they get about 1.5 inches of rain annually on average, and some years get none. Just to give you an idea of how dry it really is out here. And you better grab some moisturizer if you're coming out here. The relative humidity rarely gets above 30%, and that's only for 1 or 2 months a year. It's usually down in the teens. Hangnail City. And then if you head south around Santiago is where it starts to turn more green, and if you keep going south, you get down by Antarctica, down the Patagonia region, with some beautiful glaciers. But don't bother trying to check those out in the sim because there's only a couple of spots that look decent. And I mean spots. The satellite coverage is really bad down there, so most of it looks pretty rough. I've been trying to set up some kind of flight anywhere out there, but you can only go a few miles before there's either printed clouds or really bad satellite coverage. And I've tried all the different maps and everything. I just can't find anything. Maybe 2024 will fix that. And as far as population goes, Chile is right at the midpoint for South America with roughly 19.6 million residents as of 2023. With over a quarter of them residing in and around the capital city of Santiago. And with that, we'll turn our attention to the amazing Andes, the world's longest above-water mountain range at around 5,500 miles in length. But that is not even remotely close to the longest if you include submerged mountains. If you ever looked on a map where you can see underneath the oceans, you know that in the middle of all the big oceans, they have a huge mountain range with a big gouge in the middle of it where the plates are spreading apart. That's called the Mid-Ocean Ridge. And collectively, that thing is 40,000 miles long. The circumference of the Earth is 25,000 miles, just to give you an idea of how long that is. You know, most people think of the Andes, myself included, we typically think of Chile and Peru, but they stretch all the way up into Colombia, to the very northern part of South America. And some even consider the Southern Caribbean islands as part of that range. I think I mentioned that on one of our other flights. Looks so good. Look at that. Just amazing. And if you're trying to figure out how old these mountains are, well, good luck with that. I spent about 35 minutes trying to find a reliable figure. Depending on which website you look at, the dates spanned anywhere from 10 million years old to 60 million. But the consensus seems to be on the longer end of that. I'm going to go ahead and push our climb rate a little further. I'm going to jump it up to 1400 so we can make it over the side of that mountain. But this area is still extremely geologically active with more volcanoes than you can shake a stick at, and a lot of earthquakes out here too. Quite a bit stronger than anyone would prefer. I'll tell you about a real doozy they had in that town that we left from here in a few minutes once we get back out there. And speaking of volcanoes, we've got two beautiful specimens here in front of us. And I should mention that both of these, this one here and this one over here, are in Bolivia. So the border with Bolivia runs right through the center of both of those. We're going to cross in for just a few minutes and then head south, and we'll be back in Chile. The closer of the two, this one right here, is called Lacan Cabur, and that one tops out at around 19,400 feet. And if we could see into the crater, we're not going to be able to get high enough, but they've got a tiny little lake inside of that thing. And it's one of the highest lakes in the world, as a matter of fact. And the fact that it's not completely frozen year-round means that there's still a little bit of fire in that baby's belly, but they don't think it's erupted in at least 10,000 years. And there's some Incan ruins on the flank of this one, which we can't see in the sim, but we can definitely see on the satellite map, so I'll show those too once we get over there. Pretty neat. And there's some right at the tip too. I couldn't even see those on the satellite map. They said right around the rim of this thing somewhere. They've also got some ruins, which is very cool. And then that other more squat mountain on the other side of it there, which has a significantly larger crater. It's over maybe almost 2 kilometers wide, the crater on that one. This one's just tiny up here. That one is called Juriques. I don't know, Juriques. I think that's how I say it. Juriques. And that one's a little bit shorter at 18,700 feet. So once we come around the side of this, we're going to see our salt lakes up here. And they are called Lagunas Verde and Blanco. The green lake and the white lake. And you won't have any trouble figuring out which one is which, because the first one is really green. Actually more of a bluish color. Which I thought was really cool, because we're going to see another one that looks like that, and you know most large bodies of water in the sim get whatever color the sim wants to make them. These are going to look true to life, which is very cool. Boy, I had a lot more trouble climbing. Let me check our fuel real quick. Last time I must have been heavier or something. What's that? Hour and 30 minutes left? That should be totally fine. Or is that a low fuel warning? Let me just check that real quick before we run out of fuel. I don't know if this has state saving or not. Oh yeah. I'm glad I checked on that. There we go. That's more like it. It was 1 minute of fuel left. That would have been a problem. Look at these lakes here. So Blanco is the other one on the other side here that is a lot more white than it is bluish or emerald color. And the current water level for both of these guys is around 14,000 feet above sea level, and they're only 18 feet deep. But before all the glaciers disappeared, it was around 170 feet deep and quite a bit larger, expanding off there towards the east, which must have looked really cool because I bet there were some little islands just popping up here in the middle of that. And this gorgeous color of the water is caused by a high concentration of arsenic, which I thought was interesting. So I would not take a sip of that if you're up here in real life. Might not work out well for you. And since they're fed mostly through geothermal springs today, these guys rarely freeze either. Not to mention the fact that they're almost 100% salt. And the average temp is around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, so definitely be comfortable for a quick dip if you're just getting in and out. I've seen guys swim in water a lot colder than that. But look how great that looks. Unbelievable. Alright, let's get our mix just about right. So we'll go up to peak, and then just go a little bit rich of that. There we go. And we'll pull back on the throttles just a little bit. Bring the RPMs down to 2,500. Good. Look how cool that looks. So this one over here, which is just slightly larger, and in a little NavMap you'll see that even this blue part's not here. There's just a little bit of blue right over here. The rest of this thing is just totally white. Hence the name Blanco. And that one has an entirely different mineral composition, so they say, which is what makes it so much more opaque looking than the other one. I couldn't figure out what minerals they were, but I probably wouldn't take a sip of that one either. Alright, let me give you a quick tour of the different cameras we've got set up here. Look at that! Amazing. Man, I would love to get up there in real life and take a look at that. That's incredible. Just looks so cool. And how's our volcano look? Alright, so that's the shorter, squatter one. You can tell because it's got the huge crater on top of it. And let me see if we can see any of where those ruins are. I highly doubt it. I think we're going to be kind of flying right over it. Unless that's it. Wouldn't that be something? Are those trees? That kind of looks like where they are. No way. That might be it. Nah, they got some trees over there too. That's about the area where they should be, but those look more like trees. So we'll call them trees for now. I'm highly suspicious of those, because that's certainly not it over there. Alright, back up front. Okay, our special surprise location, which I've already kind of blown because I told you what it is just around the bend here, around the side of these mountains. Not only is this area a great spot for a good mineral soak, if you keep your mouth shut, but if you're a fan of astronomy, this is about as close as you can get to the heavens in this part of the world. And this spot we're about to see, we're going to get a little bit of popping with some of these mountains. That's the only area we're going to see any, and off here in the distance we might get a little popping too. Other than that, it's going to be a pop-free experience. This is called the Atacama Large Millimeter Array, or ALMA, if you like abbreviations. And it is a collection of 66 radio telescopes, which are the kind with the big, huge satellite dishes on them. And it is going to look unbelievably cool. Really cool. There's an area right up here on the edge that's kind of an auxiliary site, not part of the large array. And they've got several of these scattered around here, but this is not part of the add-on either, so it's going to look more like warehouses than telescopes, but we'll look at that at the end too. But they got 66 of these things out here, and what's kind of cool about them is that very few of these are in a fixed location. They can move these things up to 10 miles away if they want to create a zoom effect and improve the resolution for close-up shots. That's relatively speaking close-up. See, there's one of the auxiliary spots right there. And there was something else up here called the Pathfinder Experiment, which I thought for sure was an area where they were probably testing a Mars rover, which they did do out here somewhere, but that's not what they were doing out here. It's another telescope of some kind that was looking at something else. See, that round thing right there is actually, as you'll see at the end, a satellite dish pointing straight up in the air. But they just made it a, well, it's not a satellite dish, a radio telescope, because it's not pointing at a satellite. And then there's a couple over here, they got one way over here, and then the Pathfinder Experiment is probably somewhere around here, which is also just going to look like a couple little buildings. But there will be no mistaking that these are all radio telescopes out here. And when you look at the center of it, it looks like a parking lot for radio telescopes. They're all just bunched up together. It's a crazy, crazy sight. I've never seen anything like it. So we'll check all that stuff out. And then I need to remember once we come around to drop our altitude, or at least start getting down to 11,000 and reduce our cabin pressurization. Well, there you go. Well, let's get in the back so we can see them better. So here's a couple of the outer radio telescopes here. And when you look at this from above, they've got these little roads just spidering all out from this. This is kind of the central area here. And you can tell they do move some of them pretty far away. You can spot some of the more remote ones on the satellite image. But wait till you see this big clump in the middle. It's really wild. Okay, we got a couple of little outliers there. This is actually working out great, because while we're back here, we won't see that popping off in the distance. We're getting warmer, getting warmer. Here they all come. And more. Look at that. Awesome. Look at that. Have you ever seen anything like that? Insane. And they're really detailed too. Thank you so much for making that add-on, because that probably looks like absolutely nothing without that in there. And by the way, you should put the time of day at sometime around 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Otherwise, these guys will all be in their own shadows, and they'll just look like black blobs. So just a heads up with that. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and pull the throttle back a little bit. We'll set this down to 11,000 feet and start coming down. We'll come down to 1,000 feet a minute because we're not in any particular rush here. And let's bring this thing back down to our sea level pressurization, or at least where we started from, which is around 11,000 feet anyway. Down, 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 down. And there we go. Now we'll just watch our airspeed. So the reason why this is such a special area for me is that when I first got back into flight simming, which was quite by accident, I was playing around on Xbox. This was one of the areas that I checked out, and I wasn't even in the cockpit. I was flying in third person. And I could not believe how unbelievably fantastic and realistic it looked. Now, mind you, the last time I played any kind of flight simulator was probably early 90s. And you guys that have been doing it for a long time know what kind of a jump that was, going from that generation to this. And then I really got into it. Next thing I knew, I was building a cockpit in my office, and here we are today. So that's why this holds a very special place in my heart. And the area I took off from was way, way down here. This area is called the Zapar Ravine. And what little... you can tell they've had some kind of runoff at some point. It all kind of runs down here, then runs down this big, long basin and goes into the largest salt flat in Chile, which is probably this thing over here. And if you leave from an airport that they have down there, they have a big lithium extraction facility. I thought it was a big salt evaporation area the first time I flew over it, and it wasn't until this flight, actually, that I realized what it was. They're making, or getting somehow lithium out of the ground down there. And there's an airport right down there, which is where I left from on that first flight. Just flew all the way up along this valley. Just looked really, really incredible. So I'll show you that on the satellite map. We may take a trip out there. And there's another huge place. The next airport to the northwest is by a gigantic copper mine. I'll show you that too. I think we're definitely going to fly that one, maybe even next, in a helicopter, because it looks amazing. It's really huge. I hope it looks good in the sim. We'll find out. And then over to our right, they're going to have a little thing that's the support facility for all the telescopes, which is as far as tourists can get, I think. We'll hop on the right side of the plane again so I can show you what that looks like, because it does look pretty true to life despite being all autogen stuff. Let's get over there now so we don't miss it. Can't see it yet, but we got some great scenery anyway. So you can kind of see a little better from here since we're not right up on it. Look how wide the crater is for that one versus that one there. I mean, it looks like it might be just a few hundred meters across in that one, but that one is almost 2 kilometers, I think. And they got some ruins up at the top of that thing, which is incredible. And off to our left, we won't jump back over there now because you can't see them, but right down along the edge of one of these ravines, there's another big set of ruins. Some Incan and some that I'll tell you about as we're coming in that are right, but there's that facility right there, see it? That's pretty much what it looks like too. We're a little bit too close to see all of it, but that's the bulk of it right there. By the town we're coming into, there is a pre-Incan fortress. Not much left of it, but I'll show you that too. I don't know what we'll be able to see in the sim because of how we have to get in for our approach, but you can see it pretty well in the satellite image, so we'll check that out too. Alright, 15,000 feet. We're tracking just fine here. And then somewhere down here, they also have the most active volcano in all of Chile by that lithium extraction place, probably about 30 miles or so east of that. Man, we might have 2 more flights to do out here. And check this out. As we get closer, you'll see they almost look like they're in rows, like they may have cultivated this. I can't imagine what they're growing out in this part of the world, but that does not look like a natural plant growth pattern, does it? Look at that. Okay, we got another nice salt lake right up here, and this one's also going to have a nice blue color to it. We're really in luck with our colors today. Look at that. There's no way that's natural. If anyone's ever been on here and they know what they're growing, let me know. I'm curious about that. This one up here is called Tebinquiche Lagoon. And this one appears to be a lot closer to becoming a full-blown salt flat than those last 2 lakes. Most of it's already solidified. And if you're into things like this, I'll encourage you to check out some pictures of this one on the ground because it looks amazing. You can walk right out on the salt up to these little pools where the water still is and look down into it. It's just crystal clear. And not only is it crystal clear, but there's little crystal formations all around the edges of it. And I'm kind of wondering, I mean, surely that's not salt all the way down. I'm thinking it's like a crust, like a frozen lake, which would make me awfully nervous walking out on it. But some people were doing it and taking some really great pictures. And I don't know if you can see them from here, but we'll see when we look by. These 2 little things right here are called the salt eyes. They're just 2 little pools with a road running right between the 2 of them. There was a bookmark on that, and I figured since someone gave it such a clever name, we better check it out when we fly by. But the salt eyes, fantastic. And man, oh man, this is probably... I mean, I take 4 or 5 attempts at recording almost every flight. This is probably... I'm up over 10 for this one. I've been having some very serious technical difficulties lately. Not sure what's going on with that. It's kind of like when you've had that car with 180,000 miles on it. You love it. You've had it for 15 years. You're like, I don't need a new car. This thing's held up this long. I'm going to drive it till the wheels fall off. And then things start falling apart. Everything except the wheels falling off. And you realize it's just time to go ahead and let it go. That's kind of where I'm at with 2020 right now. I really fell in love with this thing, and I still love it, but I'm having so many problems. I think it's just the clutter that's accumulated on this thing that I'm ready to go ahead and just clean it off and give 2024 a shot. But I am going to wait about a month. I've heard a lot of the alpha testers say they got some kinks to work out, so I don't want to have to jump back and forth. So we'll probably keep uploading flights here in 2020 for a little while. Let's take a look at the eyes. See them? Those 2 little things right there? there's the salt eyes. And I think that little tiny hole right there, which is actually there, you can see it on the satellite image, is where they went up and took that picture into the side of that. Looked really amazing. But just look at the colors all around it. I mean, it's just so wild. Look at this over here. All true to life. I'm so glad they didn't make just a big brown or gray pond there like they would usually do for AI-generated stuff. That's really what it looks like, which is fantastic. Okay, so after the lake, we're going to be turning towards the north across the Valley of the Moon, which will be to our right. And other than looking amazing, there really isn't all that much to say about it. You'll not be surprised here at this point that it's one of the driest places on Earth, also one of the saltiest. In fact, they offer tours of all kinds of old salt pits and mines if you head over there. So as we come around this way, we're going to come right around the side here, and if you fly up from that southern airport, which I'll show you where to take off from if you want to do it and fly up here just along this valley. Of course, you'll miss the telescopes unless you fly way out there, but this is a gorgeous flight. If you really start to kind of set the sun or go at sunrise, when the sun's just kind of starting to peek onto this big shelf of mountains here, it's just absolutely incredible. An amazing flight. All the scenery looks good from start to finish. Just beautiful. So I'm going to hop over there on the right side so we can see all this stuff come into view, and then we'll run through our announcements real quick. So technically, I think this northern part of this is the Valley of the Moon. That's where the bookmark was, but I might try to sneak off and call all this the Valley of the Moon because it all kind of looks like that. And then the town we left from is going to be right up here, so we're going to circle around here. And if you're coming in from way up here, you got to come down pretty quick to get off that ledge and then over another little ledge right before the runway. You'll see what I'm talking about once we get out there. So as far as announcements go, we have got the voting open right now for our quarterly flight plan competition. Right now we have got 4 flights in the running. These have all been recommended by members and or subscribers to our Discord server. We got the K2 and Glaciers flight, which is in the lead right now. Our Ethiopia flight, the Leeds to Blackpool flight, and our Southern Wales flight, all in there. They are linked, so you can watch the videos if you want to. That's in the community section of our YouTube channel. And we'll leave the voting open for 1 more week. The winner, of course, will get at least a $50 gift card to the sim vendor of your choice. So far, I've donated everything that YouTube has paid me to our quarterly flight plan competitions. And as I've mentioned several times, if you're thinking about making money off of simming on YouTube, well, you better have a lifetime to do it. I've been doing this for 18 months now, and so far, they've paid me $208. So you better be doing this for the love of something other than money. And that's definitely the case with me. And if there's a spot you think we need to check out, hop on our Discord server, go to the Suggest a Flight section, just drop me a line. Ideally an airport to take off from and one to arrive at, so I know generally what you want me to look at, but even if it's just a region, maybe a couple towns or something, that's enough for me. If it checks all the boxes, we'll load it up, and you will be a part of our next quarterly flight plan competition. And then I've mentioned a couple times now, we're setting up our next group flight, which will probably be in another week, maybe a week and a half, depending on how quickly I can get that together. And I think we're going to do a helicopter flight over the Naples area. So we'll check out Pompeii, Vesuvius, Herculaneum, or Herculaneum, however that's said. I think it may have added an extra syllable there. Look at this stuff here. Look at this. Absolutely incredible. And I could see why they'd want to test the Mars rover out here, because if you didn't know any better, you'd think you were flying over Mars. That's amazing. And the Discord server is just a cool place to hang out. All kinds of great guys in there, and a couple girls. Just wonderful people. And that's where I do most of my casual conversation. Not too much on the YouTube comments, because it's hard to keep track of everything, the way they give me the notifications of that. But I get back to the YouTube comments a lot faster, because my phone makes a little dinging sound every time I get a comment on there. So drop me a line and say hi. Now, as we come around up here, you're going to see a very interesting looking formation. And the first time I flew out here, I thought it was a impact crater, and it's going to look a lot like one, but it's kind of a weird oblong shape, almost triangular, kind of like that one we saw by Bolivia, by the capital, if you remember that flight, but not quite as big as that one. And I don't know what it is. There was no markers on it, no descriptions or anything, and you'd think someone would put something like that on there, because you're going to see in a minute, it really stands out. And the thing that I find so amazing about all this is how many ancient people were living out here. I mean, this is a very inhospitable climate. Of course, the Incas were the ones out here all along the Andes. But if you go 100 miles to the west, you're at the ocean, so, you know, maybe not a lot of fresh water, but at least you'd be able to travel around and do more trading. I mean, there's not even any navigable rivers or anything up here. And if you go 150 miles to the east, you get back into the rainforest and all that. So this is like the worst possible spot I could ever imagine living. And imagine trying to hike up these mountains at 18,000 feet. You'd have to be pretty hardy and really like salt. I'm sure there's a lot of savory food up here. But I was really surprised to discover this little fort that we're going to see coming in here, the old ancient one of the ruins, they think is from around 1200, which is pre-Incan. And I was like, no way can that be right. So I went and looked at how long the Incan Empire was. They said it really first started showing signs of life around 1200. But they were only really an empire from 1429 to 1530, so 100 years. Of course, they were wiped out by diseases, mostly from the Spanish once they arrived. But they were busy during that time. They made 25,000 miles of roads, which sounds like a lot until you consider the Romans. Those guys busted out 10 times that much, 250,000 miles, 50,000 of which were paved. Not with asphalt, but stones, which is even more of a pain in the butt. Here's that thing. Look at this. So it's going to wrap... They look like almost like shock lines going around here, like there was a meteorite strike. It goes all the way around here like a big triangle, and then there's like a central uplift area right in the middle of it. Does that not look like an impact crater? But it kind of reminds me of that thing that we saw by Bolivia, which they think may have been volcanic in origin, or the Eye of the Sahara. The reshot structure, we saw that one too. Might be a similar thing to that. I just couldn't get any information about it. But look at that. Absolutely amazing. Beautiful. And very detailed. Everything has relief. Just absolutely lovely. Okay, let's get back up front because I need to get ready for our approach. After I click on this screen. I wish I didn't have to do that because I always forget to do it. So we'll start slowing down. I'm going to come on down to 10,000 feet as quick as we can. If I can get my little hand on there. There we go. And we'll come down at 1,500 feet a minute because I need to get down quick. And we'll slow this thing way down. Not that slow. Doesn't like the gears not being out. So then I had to look at the Aztec Empire to see how long those guys have been around. And they're only about as long as the Inca. They started in 1325 roughly. And they were killed off by the Spanish arrival. And they were from around Mexico City south to the start of the Yucatan Peninsula. The Mayans, however, have been around for a really long time. They started around 2000 BC and really lasted up until the 9th century when their empire, quote-unquote, collapsed. But it was more of a slow burn than a collapse. There were still a few pockets of them when the Spanish arrived, but those guys really had control for the longest time up here, and they were mostly just in the Yucatan region. It seems like their territory kind of stopped where the Aztecs began to the north. But I thought the Aztec and the Inca had been around, you know, since early ADs, but apparently that's not the case. But they had people out here, because this little fort they have right up here, and we'll see if we can see that thing as we're turning. Once we bank to come in towards our runway, we'll be able to see the area where it is, but it just won't be real detailed from here. And then the area where the copper mine is probably up over this ridge, another 20 or so miles. We'll check that out at the end. And I think I've already made up my mind. I think our next flight's going to be a helicopter trip up there, assuming it looks pretty good. Okay, gears out. That'll start us slowing down a little bit more. And keep us from beeping when I drop those throttles. Landing lights on. Prop sync off. Full RPM. And we won't mess with our mix. I'm just going to give it a little bit more. And we'll see the runway as soon as we complete this bank here, along with our little town. Don't know much about that place either, other than the fact that it's an oasis, so I can understand why people would want to be out here, because there's not a lot of green out here other than that area right there. Well, the river looks like it has some, that's called the Rio de Pedro and de San Pedro, and there's some water in it there, but on the satellite map it is bone dry. But maybe they get some runoff from the mountains or something, but there haven't been glaciers up here for thousands of years, so I don't know where the water is coming from. One notch of flaps. And there's our runway. And there's the town. Okay, so the area where the ruins are is right here, that gray area there. And if you're right over it, I flew closer, you can kind of tell that's what it is. But from here it just looks kind of like a gray area. Autopilot off. And we'll bring her on in. So once we get down, we'll take a quick tour of the little nav map, which does have a lot of things I'd like to show you, so hang around for that if you have just a few minutes. If not, of course, you can always come back to it. Trim the nose down just a little bit. One more notch of flaps. Trim the nose down some more. And boy, it's tough to miss that runway. But I thought this was a really cool flight. We should have done it a long time ago. I've had a few people ask about it. I don't know why I waited so long to come out here, because it looks amazing. Probably just because we've been out over the Andes so much. But when something looks this good, it's just hard to stay away, isn't it? And that town looks pretty good for default stuff, too. Of course, we're not right over it, but very believable. All right, let's pay attention to what's going on here. And you can see there's really no other taxiways except all the way at the other end, and then we'd have to drive all the way back to the parking spot, so we'll just get down to the end of the runway and shut her down, then we'll check out a little NavMap real quick. Probably coming in a little bit high. I know how to fix that. Alright, one more notch of flaps, final notch of flaps, and in we go. We have had a lot of recommendations for other places in Britain, considering we just picked up literally like 300 subscribers in 2 weeks from that Leeds trip. Welcome to all of our friends from across the pond, glad to have you. And just because there's been so much request for it, we'll probably do another hometown flyer up there. Everything in Britain is just so cool, so much history, so we'll check that stuff out for sure. But we've got to check out this copper plant first, and you'll see why I say that as soon as we go over there and look at it. Trim up a little bit more there. And down we go. Burn off that last little bit of speed. There we go. Down. Okay, flaps up. Hit the brakes. Roll her on out. We better open the window too. Just because we can. Awesome. Alright, so parking brake on. We'll pull our mix back to shut the engines off. And kill the mags just because I love clicking things. There we go. Alright, let's look at this real quick. So you can see on this one, I drew the airport for our arrival up here. This is where the copper mine is. The only reason I did that, and I'll fix this for the one I upload, included in the video description, because it kind of throws off a little nav map as you're flying it. It thinks you're already done with it when you leave from that spot, but I'll redraw it so it comes right back to this airport if you want to. But I drew it over there so it would track it properly. Let's get rid of that line real quick. So let's take a look at this up here while we're thinking about it. Check this out. Look at that mine. And it's like, oh, that looks pretty decent size. But when you look down at these pools they got here and the structures, that is huge. I'm thinking of that one out by Salt Lake City, which was big. I think it's the biggest hole in the ground. But as far as like surface area wise, that might be one of the biggest I've ever seen. That is massive. And you can tell it probably looks awesome. So we're going to check that out. Look at all this stuff here. This is just a simmer's dream. And they got a little town on here. That's actually a pretty good sized town. And an airport. So we can take off right there, go check that thing out, and then just come on back down. And this is kind of like what that lithium extraction area looks like if they're not doing salt there. But I mean, heck, you can just scoop a pile of salt out of the ground with your hand. All right, before we check that out, here's the area where the lithium stuff is. Look at that. So you could pick either of these two airports and just fly all the way up there to where we are right now, and it's a really, really cool flight. And if you feel like cruising over there to check out the telescopes, you can do that too. But look at that. I have no idea how they extract lithium, but apparently that's what it looks like. Look at that. Awesome. This whole trip is just so cool. So what I did was I came off here and it just came right over here across this because it looks just amazing, and then came down this valley and came in for the approach. And then the big volcano, which if we do check these things out, is, where are you? Right down here. This is the most active volcano in all of Chile, and that looks pretty dang cool too. Check that out. Yeah, we're probably gonna have to fly over there too. That looks amazing. All right, so we'll put that on our list. All right, so we came up here. Here's the town we left from. Checked out our... You can't see it here because it's frozen over, but there is a tiny, tiny, tiny little lake, and here's the border with Bolivia running right through the top of that one. The lake is like right there, but it's frozen over in this picture. And here's the Inca ruins, which I'm guessing we were probably... No, I was thinking it was this stuff here, which appear to be really our trees. But here's the ruins. Look at that. I think we're just too close. And then there's the Green Lake and the White Lake. And in the sim, this area here, as I was kind of pointing out, is open, but that's really, in real life, it looks like the only area that's not just salted over, unless the water's just that murky, which it may be. And then there's the other volcano. Look how wide the crater is on that one. They got a little lake in there, too. So we cruised down here and checked out the telescope. So this is that first one I was showing you, and you can tell that that is a radio telescope. It's just pointing straight up. They just made that a circular thing of some kind with the default buildings in there. And then they got another one down here. And then here's where the Pathfinder Experiment was that I thought might be the Mars rover deal, but it's not. That's another telescope of some kind. And you can kind of see the dish of it right there. That's pointing to the side. And then we came over here to this thing. Look at that. Boy, there was like 10 times as many telescopes in the sim. Look at that, though. That was really, really cool. I'm glad we got to see that. And all of these things down here, if you zoom in on it, there's a telescope at the end of all of these little roads here. So they have really cranked those things pretty far out. You can see another one there once it depixelates. Check that out. So up to 10 miles away, they can move those things. That's probably another one right there, too. Very cool. There's my marker to get down to flight level 1100. And here's the little support station, which is where you have to stop and can go no further if you're a tourist. But that looks spot on, too. We couldn't see this part down here, but everything else looked just like that. And then here's the other little ruins I was telling you about down by the ravine. See that there? I don't know if those are Inca or not, but they're definitely ruins. You know, that might be pretty neat. If they've got that kind of resolution in the sim, that would be a neat little bush plane flight, but I don't know if you could even get high enough in a bush plane out here. And then we came over to this guy here, which was the Tebenquiche Lagoon, and then there's the old salt eyes. Can't miss that. Love it. Great. And then here's that thing I was showing you, that little tiny spot right there. I'm pretty sure that's the picture that someone took because I don't see anything else that looks quite like that, but there's a picture online that looks like they're just peering right into that hole right there, and it's really cool. And then we came on around here to the Valley of the Moon, and there's that thing, which I just called 3 question marks because I don't know what it is. They do have mines and stuff you can tour around here, and all the other stuff that has names on it. These are like rock formations. That's called the Three Marys. And they got some old churches and stuff here. I don't know if that's Spanish-era ruins. If it says Cristana, I'm guessing that was probably the remains of a church or something, but who knows. And then as we came around here, this is where the ruins were as we were coming. You know what? It wasn't that gray area. It was just a little bit to the north of that. And I thought I saw something that looked kind of like that, so maybe it is more detailed than I was thinking in the sim. But this is where that village is that was built. It was a fortress is what they called it, around the year 1200 AD. Right along the river there, which you can see is completely dry right now. I mean, they must get some kind of runoff. There's no way they could grow anything down here unless they were just storing up water from whenever it rained, which maybe they are. And then we came on in. So if this area up here looks cool, we are definitely going to take a helicopter flight up there. That would be amazing. That'll probably be our next flight, but I'm certainly glad you came along for this one because it was absolutely awesome. As always, learned all kinds of incredible things, and I can't wait to see you all again in the skies later.